Well, good morning, everybody. Hi, how are you? Welcome. Glad to have you here. Teresa is not here this week. She's had the real privilege of officiating a wedding in Iowa. If you may recall, that is where most of her relatives are, and so she had the chance to officiate the wedding of a cousin, and obviously a great delight and privilege. So if you need something today, branch-related, I'm your guy, and I apologize just ahead of time. I just want to put that on the table. Let me share a few announcements that are coming up here, and I'm going to start with like bigger picture or kind of distancy things, and then get down to today. We have 3 new stewards who are going to join our team, and if you're really astute, you're surprised by this because typically we only add 2 every year. But last Sunday, Nate DeWard, who is one of our stewards, shared that he's taking a 9-month position down in the Virgin Islands to be an interim minister. And so with that means obviously Nate's going to have to step off as a steward. So Jeff Verkuyk is going to fill his remaining year term. Thank you, Jeff. Heather, not Carol, that's an autocorrect, not Karen, Carol, is going to serve a 3-year term as a steward of care, and Alyssa is going to serve a 3-year term as a steward of resource, assuming that they are voted in on June 1st here in a couple Sundays. So make a little mental note if you're a partner. We'd love to have you here for that, to just affirm them on that Sunday. Teddy, what's the next one? Help my memory, if you would. Yes, Create is like a month or so away, and here's my encouragement to you. Who do you know that has a child kindergarten to 8th grade who would enjoy this week? Just send them an invitation. Let them know that it's happening. That's my encouragement to you, because certainly if you are a branch person, you have already registered your own children, of course. So you don't have to worry about that anymore, right? Right? Okay, good. That was a great affirmative. Next slide, Teddy. This is coming up here starting in just a couple weeks. Most every Tuesday this summer, we're going to have fireside chats, relaxed evenings, no real agenda, just a chance to connect, roast some s'mores, and enjoy an evening together, right? Most of them will be at the Herboldt. Sarah Jane, Mike are over here. We'll have all the details in the Church Center app. That's starting in just a couple of weeks. And then, Teddy, what's the next slide? Remind me to say, yes. At the end of last Sunday, we shared a video from Leah Ferenzi, who's part of a group of students at Michigan State University who are collecting personal hygiene items. There's a bin right outside this door here, right when you walked in. You might have passed it. You can bring donations and drop them in that bin, or you can make a financial donation through our app. So if you don't have time to go run somewhere and get some stuff, you can just make a donation and we'll do it for you. And then my final announcement this morning is that next Sunday is going to be a little different for us. Okay, it's a holiday weekend. Will any of you be here? It's hard to say. I understand that. But for those of you who are here next Sunday, 9:45, we're going to have donuts and coffee. Yes, we're bribing you. We're not embarrassed to admit that. So 9:45, donuts and coffee. And then at 10, we're going to walk down the street to the Mackey J.C. Park, which is the park down here on the corner of Kalamazoo and 28th Street. And we're going to do some cleaning of that park, trash pickup primarily. We're partnering with an organization here in the neighborhood that's working on improving green spaces. They're providing all of the things that we need. And so we'd love to have you. And then we'll be back here by 11:30. And then at 12:30 on the northwest side of the city, we're going to the Verkuyks' house for a barbecue. So it's a great day. It's like a holiday sort of day, and we'd love to have you be a part of it. If you're a person who usually walks in, like some of you, I will not name you, who just walked in now, and it's 10:08, you will see us already down the sidewalk. Okay, we're not waiting for you. So if you're arriving a little late, that's fine. Just meet us at the park, Text me, and we can tell you where we are specifically, because, again, we're meeting some people there, and we're going to try to be on time. And then if you are doing the lunch, we would really, the Verkuyks really, would appreciate knowing how many people are coming, okay? So our app is the place to sign up for that Church Center app. Just search the branch. Okay. Questions about any of that? That was a lot of information. You're welcome. A lot of good things happening and coming up soon. Seeing no questions, let's move into worship together. Mindy's going to lead us in a call to worship, and the band's going to lead us in a song that I think is a new song for us. Sydney, are we doing this new one here first? Is that right? Yeah, you're welcome. And not to I should have done this before you got up here, but this is Sydney's final Sunday of leading music here at the branch, because Sydney is Ann Arbor bound to the University of Michigan in the fall. Some people are happy about that. Yep, some people are happy. And it's not that we won't see Sydney again. We're going to recognize seniors here in June 8th, if that's 2 or 3 weeks away. My brain can't do the math. So that's still coming. We'll still see Sydney, but this is the last Sunday where she said, I have capacity, time, and availability to lead. And we were like, we just started weeping, Teresa and I. But we're grateful for transitions, and we're grateful to have her lead us again. But first, Mindy's going to lead us in this call to worship. Why don't we stand as we say these words together? Yeah, I know. That was mean.
That was mean, Chris.
I'll just do it. I'm going to do the call to worship.
I'm good. Hi, yep, the mother of the graduating seniors. I got it. All right. Jesus asked in the Garden of Gethsemane, is there another way? Faced with violence, he chose peace. Surrounded by betrayal, he offered love.
We gather to remember his way, not the way of the sword, but the way of the cross, not the way of retaliation, but the way of redemptive love.
The world still offers the path of power through force, but Jesus shows us the deeper strength, to resist without hate, to confront evil without becoming it.
The God who was, we worship the God who is, we worship the God who evermore will be. He opened the prison doors, he parted the raging seas. My God, he holds the victory. Yeah. There's joy in the house of the Lord, there's joy in the house of the Lord today, and we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. We sing to the God who heals. We sing to the God who saves. We sing to the God who always makes a way. 'Cause he hung up on that cross and he rose up from that grave. My God, still rolling stones away. Yeah. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. The prisoners, now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by his grace. Let the house of the Lord sing praise. 'Cause we were the beggars, now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, now today, and we won't be quiet. We'll shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We'll shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today, and we won't be quiet. We're gonna shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We're gonna shout out your praise. We're gonna shout out your praise. Joy in this house today. We're gonna shout out your praise.
I've always been grateful because Sydney has pretty regularly introduced music that moves and is energetic and alive. Us old people, when we seem to be choosing songs, it's different, and she's always helped us have that balance. I've appreciated that very much, including that song. Hey, before we sit down, we're going to have kids who are young, kindergarten up to 4th grade. 5th grade can go down and help as well. And they're going out with Elena. Elena's headed to the back. As they do, we're going to send them with this blessing. And if you're new here and your kids are like, should we go, shouldn't we go? They are welcome to go. All kids kind of come back around communion time. So they're downstairs for about 25 or so minutes. But let's send them with these words here. May your time together be filled with wonder, joy, and friendship. You are loved. Amen. Amen. All right, before you sit, find somebody this morning. Say good morning. Greet one another. Have a chance to connect here together for a few moments. Well, let's find our seat again. It's a little bit like wrangling cats, and I'd like to think I've gotten better at it over the years. I have not. Cats are still cats, you know what I mean? Wrangling them is challenging. Who's the last one? Who's the last one? Well, it's my son or my niece, so they get enough from me already. I'll leave them alone. I want to begin with a couple of verses that we've used to frame the conversation we've been having the last month around stories of light. You know, next Sunday is this unique Sunday where we're going to the park. And then in June 1, we're going to start a summer-long series in which we do two things at the same time. And can we walk and chew gum? We're about to find out, you know. One is we're going to look at the prophet Amos. And we're going to go through the book of Amos from beginning to end. And while we do that, we're also going to tell stories of branch people, kind of little snippets, 10-minute, 15-minute stories from folks' lives. And that's going to make up our summer. So this is the last in our Stories of Light series. These are the verses that have, again, kind of grounded us for this conversation. Oh, and I didn't put them up on the screen, so you're just going to have to listen. Okay. Because that's not where it is. This is out of Ephesians 5. Just listen to these three verses from Paul. Imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children. Live a life filled with love, following the example of Christ. For once you were full of darkness, but now you have light from the Lord. So live as people of light. For this light within you produces only what is good and right and true. Imitate God, follow the example of Christ, live as people of light. Let's read a story that I think helps us think about how we might follow the example of Christ and live as people of light. It, in fact, does come from Matthew 26. And in our text today, we are with Jesus in really the final hours before he is betrayed and arrested. The disciples have just shared the Last Supper. As we looked at last week, Jesus has washed their feet, and now they've walked to the Garden of Gethsemane, which was a grove of olive trees on the hillside overlooking Jerusalem. And Jesus has been praying there in the garden. It's late at night. Really, not just praying, crying out, asking God, is there another way? My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. Jesus is wrestling. Can this cup of suffering be taken away from me? Is this the way that it has to be? Do I have to give up my life in order for peace, restoration, forgiveness, healing to come to the world? Or, Jesus is asking, is there another way? Which is a critical question, I think. Jesus is wrestling with, and the sermon today is wrestling with it too. What kind of power changes the world? Let's look further on in Matthew 26. Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with clubs and swords. They had been sent by the leading priests and elders of the people. The traitor Judas had given them a prearranged signal. You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss. So Judas came straight to Jesus. Greetings, Rabbi, he exclaimed, and gave him the kiss. Jesus said, my friend, go ahead and do what you have come for. Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him, but one of the men with Jesus pulled out his sword and struck the high priest's slave, slashing off his ear. Put away your sword, Jesus told him. Those who use the sword will die by the sword. Don't you realize that I could ask my Father for thousands of angels to protect us, and he would send them instantly? But if I did, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that describe what must happen now? Then Jesus said to the crowd, am I some dangerous revolutionary that you came with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there teaching every day, but this is all happening to fulfill the words of the prophets as recorded in the scriptures. At that point, all the disciples deserted him and fled. What kind of power changes the world? How do we move towards what we often talk about here at the branch? How do we move towards God's shalom? A world of wholeness and joy and light. In this story, we see two very different types of power. The first is in verse 47. Did you catch it? Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. This is one kind of power. It's the power I'm going to call today the power of violence. And here in this story, the violence is physical. They've come with swords and clubs. And we know the violence that is brought upon Jesus in the hours that follow. It is physical, but violence takes on many forms, does it not? If you just look at a couple of dictionary definitions, violence can be defined as to damage or adversely affect, or it can be an intense, turbulent, or furious and often destructive action or force. And when we think of violence in this way, we can imagine and we know that violence comes in all shapes and sizes. Like when we threaten someone, we are exacting a type of psychological violence on a person. When we humiliate someone publicly, especially if we're retaliating in some way against them, we're practicing a type of violence. It's destructive, it's damaging, it's intense. Think of gossip, think of blackmail, any of the isms that we'd like to name. Violence takes many forms, and here's the thing, we've all chosen violence at times. Maybe never physical violence, although as a young child I chose physical violence often with my brothers. But outside of that, I've never been physically violent with another person, but that doesn't mean I haven't been violent. Is it the only way? Is violence the only way? Sometimes it feels like it is. When life is not going the way that we think it should, when we're not getting what we want, or we're not being treated fairly or the way that we think we deserve to be treated, the power of violence is very attractive. I think, about how we might be able to harm or damage or retaliate against the person who has harmed us. And we certainly live in a culture that has embraced violence, right? Just think of our language for a moment. In the English language, we have this expression, might makes right. Yep. Or we say things like, you're killing it. You're crushing it, right? Or, if I may, nod to Gen Z, slay, right? Right? Think about those words. Isn't it interesting that these words that are like congratulatory, they're positive words, they're words about success, or you did something great, are connected to phrases that are violent? Not to mention the way in which violence makes its way into all various types of media and cultural expressions. It's pretty deeply embedded in our culture. And it was in Jesus's too, in different ways, but Jesus lived in a very violent culture. And for many of the people who were around Jesus, they saw Jesus as a threat, right? And what do you do when someone is a threat and you believe in the power of violence? Well, you show up with swords and clubs, right? It just makes sense. And if someone has just shown up with swords and clubs to arrest and attack someone you love, well, then the logical response is to pull out your own sword and strike the high priest's servant, slashing off his ear. Eye for an eye, right? Tooth for a tooth. Violence for violence. This is the power that can change things, we, I think, are tempted to think. But Jesus says, put away your sword. Those who use the sword will die by the sword. Don't you realize that I could ask my Father for thousands of angels to protect us, and he would send them instantly. But if I did, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that describe what must happen now? Just think about this for a moment. Jesus had every opportunity to meet the violence brought against him with more of the same. He had unimaginable supernatural power that he could have leveraged against those who were there to harm him. But he instead remains grounded and clear. Those who use the sword will die by the sword. The only thing violence brings about is more violence. This is true between nations and between two people. It's such a predictable pattern, and yet I think we're tempted to believe that the power that violence offers us is the answer. Jesus here, though, is showing us a different way. He's showing us that if we are to be people who imitate God, who follow his example, who live as people of light, then here's the thing: we have to confront the darkness without becoming it ourselves. You may have seen or heard this quote from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. King was wrestling with this question that Jesus was wrestling with: is there another way? And this question that I'm suggesting we wrestle with today. King wrestled with it too. What kind of power brings about a world of justice? It's a really good question. It's actually the right question to ask. And King, if you read about King, you find that he followed the Sermon on the Mount very closely. He believed that Jesus' words, when Jesus says, "You've heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, turn the other cheek. Love your enemy," right? King found that to be very powerful, and then as he grew up, he visited Gandhi, who was leading a nonviolent movement in India, resisting and ultimately toppling the British Empire, right? King had to decide what kind of power this civil rights movement was going to tap into. Because he knew that if they were going to confront the ugly realities of American racism, he knew that violence would be brought against them. And he was right, of course, right? So he knew that violence was going to be brought against the African Americans and others who would stand for civil rights. The question then would be, how would they respond to the violence? And King was committed to a nonviolent path. So much so that you couldn't sign on to the movement unless you committed to be nonviolent. And you had to go to trainings. They had regular trainings for leaders and for run-of-the-mill folks who were protesting or boycotting or whatever action they were taking, where they would come to these trainings and they would role play what they thought it was probably going to be like when they were going to go out and protest tomorrow, and people would yell at one another as if they were being, perhaps likely, a white person yelling violence at a black person protesting, and they would practice regulating their bodies. They would practice deciding how they would navigate the intensity of that violence brought against them. They had trainings on how to be nonviolent. And I think, if you're honest, if you study the civil rights movement, there were plenty of people who thought that this strategy or this commitment to nonviolence, they thought it was foolishness. You can understand that, can't you? Some thought it was weakness, including within the African American community. I mean, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King are kind of having this debate. Not kind of, they are. during the civil rights movement about what power is the right power. Maybe Malcolm is saying we need to be violent sometimes. It is what is required. And King is saying it will never get us to the ends that we long for. And I think there's still a conversation happening today and still disagreement about that. But people saw it as weakness. They saw it as foolishness. How do you feel about it? I know that when I first encountered the idea of nonviolence, I thought it was weakness. I did, if I'm honest with you. Maybe that was part of my violent childhood where might did make right. I was the oldest of 4 boys, and for a number of years, the biggest and strongest. That is no longer true anymore, if you know my brothers. But I ruled by might, and it got me a lot, in a way, you know. So I think I saw it as weakness when I first encountered it. I've come to change my mind. Gandhi said this: nonviolence is the greatest force at the disposal of humankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction devised by the ingenuity of man. Doesn't he sound wacko? Sounds foolish. King said, nonviolence is a powerful and just weapon which cuts without wounding and ennobles the person who wields it. Ooh. He's so good. Cuts without wounding and ennobles the person who wields it. I think we look at nonviolence and we say, listen, it's just not realistic. We live in this crazy world. It's a mess. Sometimes violence is just what is required. And there have been voices, though, along the way who have said otherwise. And again, both Gandhi, yes, Gandhi, and King found Jesus to be the source of this thinking. This is what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount. Again, let's be clear. There is power in violence. But does it move us closer to the kingdom of goodness, truth, and light? Just imagine for a moment 2 people engaged in a conflict that turns violent, verbally perhaps just violent, not physically, but verbally. Back and forth they go. One person says something with an intensity and a cruelty. You tell me, does the person on the receiving end feel the power of those words? Have you ever felt the power of those words? Had someone say something destructive, intense, damaging to you? You know there's power at play. And if you recoil and respond in the same way, you are also exercising a power. We just should be honest about it. There is power in violence. If there wasn't, we wouldn't entertain it. But there is. The question is, does it bring us closer to the world that God calls us to create? Think about instead the power that is present when there are 2 people in conflict and both of them, or even just one of them, says, I was wrong. Or I regret saying that to you. Do you forgive me? Or you hurt me in this way when you said that. Can we figure out a way to make it right? You can feel the difference there, right? You know the difference because I hope that while you've also been in situations where you've been locked in violence back and forth with someone, I hope you've also experienced a time of conflict where one or both of you stopped the cycle and a different power emerged that led to some sort of restoration, or at least the potential for it. There's power present in both of these ways. The question is, which one are we going to choose? What if after Rosa Parks had been unjustly arrested for not giving up her seat on the bus, what if the African American community of Montgomery had attacked the police station or set all of the buses on fire? That would have been an exercise of a certain kind of power. But instead, the black community of Montgomery responded not with fire or retaliation, but with resolve. And for 381 days, think about that, over a year, they boycotted the bus system. Now, you and I don't ride the bus, I'm suspecting, with any regularity. At least most of us do not. So you have to kind of remember, yeah, you could think of the school bus. Some of you ride a school bus regularly. What if the school bus just wasn't available, or you decided to not make it available and you had to walk to school every day? Or take away your car. Your car was the source of the injustice, or kind of the linchpin of it, and you said, you know what, in resistance to this injustice, I'm not going to drive. Can you feel how difficult that would be? And they did it for 381 days until the Supreme Court ruled that public transportation could not be segregated. Now, we don't know what would have happened if they had set all of the buses on fire. We don't know. That's not what happened. But I do take Jesus' words seriously, that to live by the sword is to die by the sword. And I'm not sure it would have gotten them what they wanted in the end. Or have you heard of the singing revolution? I had not. And yet, I was alive at the time that it happened. What would I have been? Late middle school, early high school. This is the late 80s, early 90s. Have you heard of the Soviet Union, young people in the room? Okay, all right. Mm-hmm. There are 3 countries that were part of the Soviet Union. They're in blue there. 3 small little countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. They were the western edge of the Soviet Union. These poor folks were in the crosshairs of World War II. First Hitler, then Stalin, then Soviet Union in its form. Part of being in the Soviet Union, not by choice, by force, right, by violent force, part of what it meant to be in the Soviet Union meant that you could not sing, believe it or not, your cultural songs. Because the Soviet Union was trying to make one kind of monolithic group, right? And so if you had national songs, anthems, folk songs, songs that you sang that told about your history, you were forbidden from singing them. That's what it meant to be in the Soviet Union. But in the late 80s, as the Soviet Union began to weaken, people in Estonia started gathering in public spaces singing, to sing these songs. It was a form of resistance, and a risky one. People were disappeared for obeying these sorts of things, okay? But enough people showed up and started singing. And before long, there was a gathering of 300,000 people at the festival grounds in Estonia. That, just to give you context, is a quarter of their population. That's like 75, 80 million Americans showing up in one place to sing. It's a quarter of their population showing up, resisting the rules, the injustice of this oppressive government that they were under. And then the next step is that in 1989, people joined hands from the top of Estonia 600 miles down to the Lithuanian border. 600 miles, hand in hand. They estimate it was a couple million people came out at the same time and sang and stood, demanding freedom. Have you ever heard of this? Some of you have. Good for you. I, again, had not. Somehow I missed this. So I want to show you like a minute and a half trailer to a documentary that was made about this singing revolution.
It was an extraordinary show of mass defiance in the Baltic region of the Soviet Union.
Whenever you give free speech to people, then things get out of hand.
This singing together, this was our power.
If 20,000 people start to sing one song, then you just cannot shut them up. It's impossible.
What role can singing play when a nation is faced with annihilation by its neighbors? Can culture hold a people together? The small country of Estonia has faced these questions.
I think that to have freedom through singing was the most important thing maybe in my life.
This is the story of how culture saved a nation.
You know, again, nonviolence feels fanciful, it feels weak, it feels foolish. Not just on a nation-to-nation level, but I think even in our own lives. When we've been harmed and hurt, it feels like the right response is to retaliate in kind. And the question, I think, one of the questions that Jesus poses here at the end of his life is, what kind of power do we believe will actually change the world? Did all of those singing people immediately create the downfall of the Soviet Union? No, it wasn't quite a one-to-one in that way. And yet the power of their voices and the feet walking together in Montgomery, these quiet, again, seemingly maybe weak acts of resistance, did something that violence never could. They revealed truth. They awakened consciences. They drew people toward a more just and beautiful world. This is what light does. It exposes, it illuminates, it heals. It does not need to dominate in order to transform. Jesus stood in the garden and chose that kind of power. The power of love, not the sword. And he invites us to do the same, not because it's easy, but because it's the only power that leads to life. And so this week, I just have no doubt you're going to encounter the temptation to respond to the wrongs of this world or the wrongs in your own life with some sort of violence. And again, not punching someone in the, whatever. I know you're not that kind of people. But we all know the temptation to speak violently, to act violently, to do things that are destructive and harmful towards another. And this week, I hope you'll hold that question. I hope you'll wrestle as Jesus did in the Garden of Gethsemane with, what power do I actually believe will change the world? Listen, it's an act of faith to believe that love and surrender are strong enough. It's an act of faith to believe that love and surrender are powerful enough to change the world. So may you be people of faith this week, who imitate God, who follow the example of Christ, who live as people of light, not ruled by fear or vengeance, but filled with love, not conformed to the culture of violence, but transformed by the Spirit of peace. May you be those people this week. Amen. I want to invite us into a brief prayer of confession that will have just a short moment of pause and reflection for you and for me to consider what this might mean to us in our lives today. And then we're going to come to the table and share in this meal together. But let me invite you to pray with me. God of life, every act of violence in our world, in our communities, between myself and others destroys a part of your creation. Forgive me for believing in the power of violence, for responding in ways that are destructive. Make possible the impossible by cultivating in us the fertile seed of surrender. Give me the vision of faith to see the way of Jesus and follow in his steps. Amen. May this meal today give us vision and faith. May it help us see the foolishness of the cross, the strength, the power in surrender. That's what this meal is about, at least in large part. It is this practice that Jesus commands of us as if he knew how seductive the way of eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth would be. He knew we would need a regular practice to help bring us back to the center, to help show us again what it looks like to follow the example of Christ. And so, if you are hungry and thirsty for justice, if you are longing for peace, for a world made new, we invite you to share in this table with us. Young and old are invited here at the branch. There's no test to take. It's simply, if you choose and desire to share in this meal, you are welcome. At the same time, there's no expectation this morning. So, if staying in your chair would be more meaningful, or getting up and taking a walk would be a better use of your time by your estimation, then do that. But know that you're welcome and invited. I need a few folks to help serve this morning. Those who would like to can come on up. We're going to have a few people up here. If you need a gluten-free option, that's going to be up front. There also will be a station in the back, and it's interesting. I see that as well. We'll get to that in a second. There'll be a station in the back with bread and cup. Mel, would you run and grab tongs? Did you see those in the kitchenette? Would you be able to do that for me? And we'll get in place, and then she'll be here shortly. When you come forward or go to the back, someone will place a piece of bread or a gluten-free cracker in your hand, and then you can take one of the cups from the tray. Good? I think we had Clarence. He's maybe also going to get tongs for us. So he'll be back, and he'll be in that back station with juice. Friends, these are the gifts of God for the people of God. Let's share them together. And let me also just say, take these back to your seat, and we'll eat and drink them at the same time. Okay. right when we're kind of starting to serve, these kids come back from downstairs, and they never come, well, that's not true. Sometimes they don't come back quietly. I like that. I understand why we speak in hushed tones for communion, but it is interesting because is there another meal that you share that is hushed like this, you know? I mean, I get why we do it, I do, but I'm always wanting to invite us to be a little more verbose, a little more joyous, a little more loud. And so if you ever are feeling really spicy and you want to, you know, lead us in that way, I am going to back you up wholeheartedly, okay? The way of Jesus is not weakness. It is the way to actually change the world. We remember that as we take and eat this morning. Because while it may seem like emptying your life is the end, it is actually a new beginning. It leads to something more. And so we commit to being people who lay down our lives as we take and drink this morning. We have these little baskets that we'll pass. You can put your cups in and we'll get them washed and taken care of. Thanks. I'm going to invite the band to come back up. Lucy's going to join them. You know, Sydney's last time, at least in the near future. We're never going to say never, Sydney, just to be clear, okay? You're always welcome back. This is like Lucy's second time? Third? Second? Am I right about second? So, you know, endings and beginnings often are together, and they are this morning. Let's stand together. Let me invite you to do that as we sing here one final song.
That cannot be burned. It speaks truth that cannot be learned. It's a treasure we can never earn. Oh, it goes places we're afraid of going. It's not a fist, it's a hand wide open, reaching out to the down and broken. We believe your love is the strongest way. You're tearing down walls and you break our chains. Even in this darkness, hope will rise again when we lay down our weapons and we let love win. Lord, we lay down our weapons and we let love win. Lord, your love is a friend to its enemies. It takes a hit, then it turns a cheek. You lay down your life for peace. Oh, love won't cast a single stone. It's never proven by words alone. You come alive in our flesh and bones, and in our souls. We believe your love is the strongest way. You're tearing down walls and you break our chains. Even in this darkness, hope will rise again when we lay down our weapons. We will let love win. Lord, we lay down our weapons and we let love win. And what if fighting for our beliefs looks more like surrendering? Though that's the hardest thing. And what if standing up for what's right means laying down our pride? down walls and you break our chains. Even in this darkness, hope will rise again. When we lay down our weapons, we will let love win. We believe your love is the strongest way. You're tearing down walls and you break our chains. Even in this darkness, hope will rise again. When we lay down our weapons, we will let love win. Lord, we lay down our weapons and we let love win.
Well, before we leave, and I extend a blessing that's connected to that, I just do want to take a moment here. Because I remember when Sydney began, she was already a very talented musician, and you were hungry to learn. And talent and hunger are really kind of like dynamic combination of things, right? And to see who you have continued to become and how you've grown in your musical gifts, in your sense of yourself, what a privilege for us to watch and to be a part of that. Can we just thank her for all that she has given to us? Yeah. We're so fortunate here to have people who are willing to give of their time and their energy. And you know, as we've been saying for a couple weeks now, if you are someone who is a musician, or as Sydney was, or Lucy is, or Zeke and JP were, you are a budding musician, you're just getting started, this is a place where you can grow and try and experiment. And so if that's any of you, young or adult, who want to try, let us know, and we'd love to have you join in this part of our gathering here. Okay. Come give Sydney a hug afterwards. Again, you'll see her again in a couple weeks for sure. After that as well, but come give her a hug today if you'd like to do that. Friends, you're stepping into a world that is chaotic and is intense, and there's a lot of reasons to think that the power of retaliation and violence is the way to go. May you be people of faith this week who remember that there is a different way, and that the power available to you through Christ is the power that changes the world. Be those people. Amen. Thanks for being here, everyone. Enjoy the sunshine. Have a great day today.